Welcome to another edition. It's been a little while since we've had an Indiana neighbor join us. And again, as Dan and I were just talking, everybody has a story, and Dan's is very unique, very giving. Dan was recently named in November the Martin County Community Foundation Philanthropist of the Year. So, Dan, first of all, welcome. But tell me a little bit before we get into everything you do and why you do it. What did that night mean for you when you're named the Philanthropist of the Year by the foundation?
It was a total surprise. I went to the meetings like I always do for 20 some years. I've been to every one of them, and hadn't even thought about just going to the meeting. And I walked in, and two or three of my granddaughters from Northern Indiana come running out, and then it dawned on me they're not to try a trip from Lafayette down to Lagodi in Martin County. And I know what you're here for, and it was a total surprise. But it. To hear it was different. It was certainly an honor. And I go to the other philanthropist of the year before me, thinking about each one of them. I knew them. I promoted them to a certain extent for that same honor. And the Lothmillers and Fred Woods and so many, Joe Williams and Bernita, just friends of mine who had that same honor, and it meant a lot. It was a shock. And of course, when you're shocked, and they say, well, why don't you come up and say a few words? You have no preparation. You just kind of have to wing it for sure. But I really appreciated the thought. And I think it's a good thing to promote philanthropy in general anyway. I always have thought that. So, it was an honor.
When you think of and you look up, when you think of philanthropy, you're thinking about people throwing around money like the foundation does, right? But it's so many more things than that. And Dan has certainly given his share of donations. But the time, and we don't even have time, Dan, to go through all of these.
Please don't.
We don't. But we'll put them up on the screen as we go along. But I added the years of service up, and this isn't even up to date, that I've been given. Of course, they overlap. But we're talking nearly 200 years of community service. Now, again, over 20 organizations, much more than that actually, but over 200 years. And let's just start. This is called Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbor. So let's just start from the beginning. A legacy that you feel came from your parents who grew up in the most desperate times in American history. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, they were, I'm a baby boomer, born in 1952. So I was right in the middle of the baby boomer thing, and my father was a World War II veteran, Army veteran, and it's one of them things. Yeah, they both went through the Depression as teenagers, and hard times. My parents were neither one wealthy. From wealthy families, they were basically. My father, in particular, was poor. They did crop sharing back when that was a thing, and it was ironic that you wonder why you are like you are, and you can almost always go to your upbringing and the lessons you learn from your parents or other people. In that particular story, my father was hurt in a bad accident before I was born. Right before I was born, I had two twin brothers, and he had a bad wreck in northern Indiana, killed two people, and just about burned his legs off, which sounds bad, and it was bad. He was in the hospital for about 4 months, and people helped him. And they really, sorry. When you think about charity and helping people, it's a two-way street. Somebody has to need it, and somebody has to want to give it. And they had people help them. So when he got better, and he never got completely over that, you can't. But when he could, and I've seen it many, many times, he would help people with money or a ride to church or things like that. And you see these things as a kid and you remember them. So that's where I think, I know certainly everybody has circumstances that can put them in that position, but it's what you do maybe after the circumstance or the accident happens that really starts to, I think, make a difference. So I don't know if that answers your whole question or not.
Well, parents Joe and Hazel.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, it does. Obviously, I was looking for the foundation of your giving, and that's, you not only heard about the story whenever you were older, but you saw his giving in practice.
Sure. There when philanthropy is, I had to learn to spell that word, by the way, when I worked for Community Foundation. It was not a word you tossed around on a regular basis, and I'm hoping it gets tossed around more. But I think the time, time, talent, and treasure are the three things people tend to think about, and they're all valuable. Sometimes the time is the most valuable if you're dealing with a person that needs an encouraging word or something like that. The treasure is probably, in my mind, probably the last one of the values. But the time that you spend on and the talents that you bring are shaped by everything you do. You mentioned 21 things. Every one of them was more of a time of life experience. What was I doing? How old was I then? Uh, and what could I do or did do at that time that interested me, that I could bring my time and probably at that time my talents.
Yeah, you said that your parents moved from northern Indiana to southern Indiana. Why was that?
Well, my mother and dad were raised in Du Bois and Daviess County.
Okay.
And dad and mom went to school together in Ireland, Indiana, and met there. And this was when, right in 1940, 1941 time frame. And when World War II broke out, they my dad joined the army at 18 as soon as he could. Uh, it was kind of an interesting thing that I really didn't appreciate his service that much until he passed away and I got a lot of his records, his service records. And I showed them to a couple of people, and one guy says, Dan, your dad had 5 Bronze Stars. I go, yeah, I can see that. I said, I never really thought much about it. He said, I've never heard of that before. And I got to look a little deeper and said everywhere he went, he got a Bronze Star. They moved him around. He was an artillery surveyor. So he was kind of in the middle from the artillery and the enemy. Your surveyor was out in front or right with them to tell how to elevate or shoot the artillery shells. So he said that, and I got to thinking about how do you get 5 Bronze Stars? And you earn them.
Courage.
It was really different. But after the war, they come back, and my dad and mom got married 8 days after he got back from World War II. 8 days, fast as you could do it, I'm sure. I don't think anybody can beat that. But they lived up around Chicago, northern Indiana, where he got a job driving a bus, and then later he got a job driving a truck, semi-truck. And after his accident, they were just kind of fed up with the whole region, Chicago, Gary, that region, and they wanted to get back to their roots. So they came back and lived in Jasper for a while, and then to Hayesville. And then when a farm came up for sale across the river, the White River at Hayesville, they bought it, and we're still there.
So that farm has been in existence in the Gregory family for how long?
1953.
1953?
I was 1 year old. I remember it.
Do you?
No, I don't.
Okay. What do you remember about your early days? Obviously, they bought it at a year old, so all you know is him as a farmer. Were you engaged right away as soon as you could into the farming community?
I remember, first of all, life on a small farm like that for a kid is about as good as it gets. You got a farm pond to fish in. We always had a dog or two, playing all the time in the woods, and just a really good upbringing. I remember specifically, helping in the poultry buildings. Even as a 6-year-old, I learned how to count in a poultry building pretty well, and just helping. You just kind of your abilities, and you get stronger and older, you can do more things. So it was a time in my life that I really appreciated uh, for the opportunity that a lot of people don't get. If you don't work with your parents on a farm, how do you participate in their occupation? You can't, or not very well.
Was the farming community prosperable at that time, or was it a difficult time in regards to eating and doing things that you'd like to do?
It was so different then. My dad's first tractor was a horse, and I got pictures of it sitting on this big old workhorse. And shortly after, he bought a little small tractor, which was the first tractor I drove at 6 years old. I was driving this old tractor. It was a small one. So it was The technology now is night and day compared to that, and the ability to produce more as an individual. Farming has went through a tremendous amount of consolidation. It used to be 40-acre farms were not that common, and be able to make a living on it. Maybe some always had a garden, of course, but the consolidation has gobbled up a lot of the small farms and mega farms now in the West, particularly in the plains, just dwarf what we were doing back in the 50s and even into the 60s.
Was there anything in your life other than the farming life that you thought you would get into later on?
In school, in high school particularly, I was kind of leaning toward the mechanical type of things. Um, and I don't really know what happened to that dream. I'm kind of glad I didn't pursue it. I like what I ended up doing better. But the farm was always the constant. The opportunity was there to grow it. There's always opportunity to grow a farm if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. You lived and went to school in the Rutherford
Oh yeah,
district for how long? How far did you go up into Rutherford?
all the way. Okay, I see. Well, the consolidation in Lagodi between St. John and Lagodi happened in my 8th grade year. And up until that time, the 8th grade stayed at Rutherford. My 8th grade was at Lagodi. So 7 years at Rutherford and the rest of them at Lagodi.
And you graduated what year in Lagodi?
1970.
That's what I thought. Pretty good year to graduate.
It was, I've written some columns for the local paper for several years, and one of my favorites to talk about was that time frame when you had this melting pot of two schools that were historically kind of two schools. We had different ball clubs and different people, and my wife was actually a St. John's person, and I'm a public school person. So, we were dating, I think, our junior year already. I know. And then when the schools merged for all the reasons they did, I kind of liked it and she kind of liked it too. I think was we're in the same school now, so we could see every day more. And but that was I think it was a very hard thing for the St. John's kids to lose their school and lose a lot of their history and their heritage there and their culture. But fortunately, 1970 was a pretty decent year for basketball.
And bringing the community together.
It did. It did. As a kid at the school, we didn't, we were just part of the experiment without really thinking about it being that way. But it really did bring the community together and have a good relationship with the schools to begin with. A lot of the administrators at the time worked really hard to try to get that to work. And they brought in some teachers that they knew would help make that happen. But we got the kids. There still had your cliques within the schools, but there was a lot of mergers too in those cliques, and new ones formed. And looking back, it probably was a good thing. There'll be people that disagree with that, but not too many.
Not too many. Barb's maiden name was what?
Pardon me?
Your wife's maiden name was?
She's a Walker, and her family's got deeper roots than mine here.
With the Walkers
and the Larkins.
Sure.
Yeah, her home that I met her in, that was in that family. They built it back in the 1908 time frame. The Walker addition, when Lagodi was being formed, was named after their family because they had the land and was bought up, and everything up into the kind of the southeast part of town was the Walker addition.
Yeah.
And we started really thinking about that when her mother passed away, and we were looking through all the paperwork and deeds and things like that. And it was kind of, she's a Walker through and through.
I live on Walker Street.
Yeah.
Is she part of the Fenton Walker family?
Yes, but I think that's more of a distant Walker.
Mm-hmm.
But you get into my father-in-law talked about how many first cousins he had in school, because everybody back then was having 6, 8, 10 kids. And I think it was like 50 some first cousins in school at the same time as he was.
Wow. You said you had twin brothers.
I do.
What other siblings? What other siblings do you have?
That's it.
That's it? Two brothers? In their situation today?
My brother Brian was killed in a fire in Santa Claus in his home about 7 years ago. And, that's an odd thing for me. I typically don't like to talk about that too much because it was a fire, and I was a fireman, not then, but I'd been a fireman, been through some of that kind of thing. And I went and spoke to the fire department down there because they were they were going through some of what I was going through. And anyway, he passed away. One of my favorite brothers.
Yeah.
My other favorite brother is Brad. He's in Boston. He's a Navy veteran from the Vietnam War, and I don't see him that much.
I apologize. I wasn't aware that that was your brother. Yeah. Older?
Older,
They're
4 years older.
than you. Okay. All right. So if you've watched these, I like to talk about, I guess, the dating of the wife, the proposal. Was there anything that was romantic about it that would be interesting to us, or do we just move on?
Okay.
I thought there might be.
Yeah. You did?
I did.
That's not fair. Well, I always tell the story. How you're in that time frame of your life where you're actively hunting. and,
Actively hunting, is that what you said?
and me and my friend Bob Whiteside were actively hunting one night in Lagodi. And I'm joking. That's not.
Yeah.
That's just a term.
I know.
But we turned right on Second Street, and Bob looks down the street. He says, "There's some girls down there. I know them." I said, "Okay, let's go down there." So we went down there, and I was driving. And I had a '57 Chevy at the time, which kind of it wasn't the classic then as it is now. Uh, and we stopped and we talked to him. And actually, Bob walked my wife home, and I walked another girl home. They were next door neighbors. And then shortly after that, I've seen Barb a couple of times around town, and we went to the first basketball game November 8th, 1968, and we stayed together ever since.
How do you know that date? November 8th,
Dating?
1968.
How?
Yeah.
The
Pretty good day, yeah.
The drive-in movies were still a big thing then. Basketball games were a big thing then. In '68, St. John's was still school.
Mm-hmm.
They were a basketball team. So we would go to either or both games when we could. And it's one of the things you're kind of getting interested in each other, and you see a lot of things you like, and you hear a lot of things you like, and you just kind of keep meeting and keep going out, and eventually she said, "I do," or "I will, I accept."
Did she accept the farming life?
Did she? Yes. Barb's a city girl at heart, and she never drove tractors. She never did some of the physical manual labor, but she did some. And the turkey barns were a good place when you start birds like that. They're small. That was her time when she really helped on the farm a lot. But yeah, she would do whatever we needed beyond that she could. But she's a city girl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still working on her.
Still working. It's only 51 years, right?
Yeah.
You'll get there. We had talked prior to, we're both at a little disadvantage today. Mine's temporary. Dan's has been permanent for a long time. I've got, just in case, I've got some cough drops and water, working my voice back into some sort of shape. And you, Dan, it's not a secret. You've got a hearing defect, and thought it'd be a good idea if they want to know your neighbor's story. Tell us a little bit about how that came about and how you discovered it.
Well, hearing can be affected by a lot of things. The first thing that affected me was my genetics. My maternal side of my family had a lot of hearing loss from as long as they could remember. People were semi-deaf or deaf. So it isn't a surprise that I inherited some of that gene. The second thing that affected mine was my occupation. If you're around machinery a lot back when it wasn't a big deal, you're young, you're going to live forever, you don't think about protecting it. And the manufacturers of the equipment weren't thinking about it either. So, combine that with the genetic thing and the experiences in the farming life, plus a little bit of military, it just got worse and worse. So I have about a 90% loss, which is a lot. But I wear hearing aids since I was 35. I remember being tested in grade school and flunking the test. But I finally got serious enough where I had to spend enough money to try to fix it. And I'm so happy that there is a fix for it, or I wouldn't be sitting here. Because a lot of things that you look at things I've been through and done, I had to be able to hear on most all of them. So it was. I always advise people, to get the help that they need. If they have a hearing loss, it's out there. It gets better all the time. I'm now using Bluetooth, to listen to music that I could never really sort out the sounds real well. Now it's great. I'm listening to music all the time in my truck. Uh, so I wouldn't. I think people have a little bit of shame because of it. That's not necessary. It's no different than not being able to see well. And you get glasses, nobody thinks a thing about it. The kicker is probably the expense. And I've bought 7 pair, and I'll be buying more.
Yeah.
They don't last forever, but the good thing is they don't last forever. So when the technology gets better, you can get it. So, uh,
But you're able to relate to your grandkids, your kids, in somewhat of a normal fashion?
you know, the things I would miss would be a lot. Would be everything to me. And I think that's where I see people historically. They've done so many studies on personalities and how hearing loss affects people's lives, where they'll withdraw. They don't want to go out anymore. They don't want to get involved in anything because they can't participate like they would like to or should. Uh, so I think my message on that would be, get at least look into getting some help. See who can help you afford, and there's programs to help. And even Medicare is starting to notice it as a health issue because people get depressed because of it, or they don't socially interact because of it, and they lose so much of their life. And I just encourage people to go get it, just at least find out more about it. And it's I'm I kind of always wear mine where people can hear them. I know people like to hide them. I say, how are people going to help you if they don't know you have an issue?
Right.
So I'm not saying you put a sign out, but people will help you if they know you
Yeah.
need that help.
You had mentioned a little bit of military background. Tell us about that.
Um, yeah, well, you go back to 1960, 1970 when I graduated. Um, I was in the last draft for Vietnam, and my number came up and the day before my birthday when I turned 19. My number was 61 out of 365 birthdays a year. Mine was 61. At the time, they took up to 120. That was a projection. If you're under 120 and we need you, you're going to get drafted. I chose not to get drafted. I just bought a farm. I just gotten married. If you remember, I was going to get married. I said, it's really inconvenient for me, which is a terrible excuse, but to go to regular Army or Navy or whatever. So I chose the Guard. And I'll tell you what, Greg, that was a time history. If you live long enough and through some things, you think our country kind of can be in a mess now. Vietnam was horrible. It was a bad idea. It was probably prosecuted unfairly and wrong. But if you're 19 in 1971, you got to think, do I want to do that? My brother was already there. He said, don't come over here if you don't have to. So I kind of, between the inconvenience of it and the number and the whole Vietnam experience that we went through, the Guard was my choice. I was a communications specialist, which seems kind of funny, put a deaf guy in communication, because I shouldn't have passed the test, but I did. I don't even think they looked.
I was going to ask you about that. So it didn't hinder you going in.
Physically, I could do it, but yeah, I had enough hearing loss there if they would have actually tested me, and I don't think they did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure they did. It was more of a local doctor just saying, yeah, Dan's fine. So, but I did the 6 years as a communication specialist, went through the combat training that everybody in the Army goes through, and learned to climb poles to hang telephone wires and radio stuff. And I don't regret it. I didn't take advantage of it maybe as I should because the culture at the time was not military friendly. And people my age will tell you that's a good way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
A good friend of mine, Kenny Fry, talks about a story of, he was in the Army Reserve, a helicopter pilot, and talking about them advising people not to wear their uniforms in public. Think about that.
Yeah. Protecting your country in what you're thinking you're doing, and yet there's shame in how it's perceived.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, the military has now it's changed so much, and we've done a really good job of going back and rethinking about the guys and the ladies that went to Vietnam. What they went through and how they were treated was so wrong and so against our history and our culture. But at the time, it was bad. And, you know, it's been repaired to a point where the guys are wearing the hats and people are thanking them, which they should be. It's not too late to do that. And I always make a point, Veterans Day, to call. I got my phone and my address book, a contact book in the phone. I call every one of them that I know and have their number to thank them because they need it. They deserve it. They've earned it. And I always take just how hard is that to do?
Not very.
Not very, and it only takes a few words. I used to call Bob Prather, and I loved talking to Bob. Bob was such a gracious gentleman, and he would always have his. I talked to Lana, his daughter, recently, and I said, "Man, I really miss talking to your dad on Veterans Day and other days through the year, but just specifically Veterans." She said, "Dan, you don't know what that meant to him."
Yeah, Bob, I tried to get to do this because of his stature, his veteran, and he would always say, let me think about it. He wasn't going to do it. He wasn't going to talk about it. But I wanted to afford him that opportunity, and I regret that I wasn't able to sit down and talk to him or other veterans of World War II in particular, but I will for the Vietnam era for sure.
Yeah, um, yeah. There's so many veterans around that do wear it pretty uh, upfront about it. My father was the opposite. He never talked about that. I think in his situation, and given his military history and the things where he went from South Africa to Berlin and all the way through, he seemed just too much, and he didn't really care to visit that.
I don't know how many times that's come up, but I talk about my grandfather on my dad's side as well. He was in World War II. And once you started to talk about it, he wouldn't say a word. Might be some tears flowing because it went through, but never learn his experiences in World War II.
I think some veterans need to talk about it.
Some do.
And I think he got a little more, my father got a little more apt to do that, but never to me, very rarely to me.
Mhm.
And I understood, particularly as I got older, I understood this is not a topic of discussion. It's too painful. But the people who do need to talk about it, it's just how they have to express that experience that they can stand to do it.
Mhm.
It's a very personal thing to be in the military. There's a lot of lonely times. Um, Mine was just about as mild as you can get, but we had a lot of Vietnam drill sergeants, and I mean these guys were tough. And if you're a drill sergeant in general, you already have a disposition to be pretty uh, tough. And I always admired them because even though I didn't particularly like them, I could see why they had to be that way. I think that was their way of coping too, was to be tougher.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, the farm that you came back to, was it your home farm, your parents' farm that you're farming today? When did your parents pass?
My dad passed in 2002, and my mother passed in 2014.
Did they stay on the home place for as long as they could?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I moved, Greg. I moved where I live now is 700 feet from where I grew up.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because people say, "How could you stand to be there that long?" I go, I wouldn't be anywhere else."
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, this is not just my home. This is my life. And when you're in the farm, you don't have. We got fairly close neighbors, but not real close. And um, the hills and the trees and everything. You've got experience with every step you take. You can remember doing something there, and it's different. I admit that there's a lot of farmers who feel the same way.
Mhm.
That's their life. It's not just where they live.
Mhm. You have three children, is that right?
I do.
Can you name them?
Sure, I've met David, David,
That wasn't a test.
David, Mark, and Christy. David runs the farm now. We sold or given all of our land except 4 acres that me and Barb still have to either David or Christy, and they live. I got 700 foot away. I got 4 grandchildren too. So that 700 feet gets shorter all the time for them. Their legs get longer. But Christy works here in Lagodi at Redemption Church,
Yeah.
and her husband Josh works at Crane, and 4 grandkids there. Mark's a banker. He's an interesting story himself. He went to Purdue, and I did wear the Purdue hat just to aggravate y'all.
I did wear this for no particular reason, but it is kind of cream and crimson.
I'll get back to Mark in a second, but I was an IU fan forever. And my kids decided to go to Purdue. I started getting this stuff at Christmas.
Yeah.
And I had to wear it. And eventually you kind of change your attitude.
Blood is thicker than water.
But if you look at Indiana as a whole, we got such good secondary schools here. You got Rose-Hulman and ISU and Southern Indiana. There's just so many, and IU and Purdue and Notre Dame. It's just a blessing to have that kind of schools. The athletic rivalry will always be there, and it should be. I think it makes life fun and interesting. And, we don't hate the other school athletics. We just like ours better.
We like to win those games.
Yeah. But Mark's a banker, and he went to Purdue and got his bachelor's at Purdue, and he did some foreign studies in Sweden and met his wife there and got his master's degree in Sweden. She got her bachelor's in Sweden, got her master's at Purdue. So they both are living their life up there with 3 of my granddaughters.
Where's Mark?
He's north of Lafayette. He's out in the country. He's got 50 acres of land up there.
Wow.
And his roots he talks about, why would anybody want 50 acres of lot to take care of? He said, well, I've always had land around them. Okay.
Yeah.
But they do show cattle from 4-H on. The girls are 14 and something.
Yeah.
14, 11, and 8, I think.
Well, I only know Christy, and what a heart of gold. What a wonderful, wonderful young lady you've raised there, for sure.
Say again?
I said I only know Christy, but what a wonderful person you've raised, you and Barb.
Your kids are. I'm a big country music fan, and this is kind of a little off topic, but there are songs that make you really think about family and country and all kinds of things. And Alan Jackson's one of my favorite country artists, and he's got this small town Southern man song.
Oh, yeah.
And part of his song is talking about what he leaves behind. It's his greatest contribution. Mm-hmm. Greatest contribution is the ones he leaves behind. Yeah. And you think about that, and I could see most parents saying the same thing, because we are terminal, and at some point it's what we leave behind. Mm-hmm. And in my case, I'm proud of all my kids and what they do, what they've done, and what they will do.
Well, let's talk about your service for a little bit. I always glance at the clock because I don't have all day on this thing here because it will run out of film time. But I will, as best I can, put on the screen everything that I've got that's compiled from a biography. And you'll get the picture, but we're not going to talk about all of those. But I am interested, do you remember your first venture into serving the community? Was there something that you remember at a young age that you did that you felt this was going to go on for a long time?
4-H was, when I was in my early 20s, they came and asked me to be a 4-H leader. And I was in 4-H, my brothers were in 4-H. So 4-H was a big part of my early giving back to the community in that way. Went through all the ranks of that organization and the extension service too. And it was, it was connected to agriculture, and I was interested in it. It was a natural. So that was probably my first thing where I would say I gave back.
What about once you were, I guess, an adult, where you knew, you spoke of there's always somebody who needs something more. And when you speak of you and your defect, I guess, and at times it's discouraged you because you have to be able to hear. It's ironic because everything you've done, you have to listen to a story and react to it, right? But it's been rewarding.
Yeah. Actually, ironically that you bring that up, because when I was president of the 4-H board was the summer I got my first hearing aids.
Okay.
And
how old? About how old?
I was 35.
Okay.
At 35, I got my first hearing aids because I was already just missing way too much, both at home and at work and out and about. And I was wanting to fix that. And I remember crowning the queen that night with these hearing aids in. I really felt awkward because I was hearing things I had never heard before. And then you kind of have this, I really don't like the way they look mentality at that point, which I got over. But that was probably my first, really what I would call giving back to the community. The National Guard came before that. We've already talked about that. So that was probably it.
So when I think of Dan Gregory, and I see things on here, on this information that I was given, none of it surprises me. And I think I know as I look down that he was probably on every board, every council. But I think what I most recognize you with, or what I most think of you, is St. Vincent de Paul. And you were telling me a story where we could go full circle for my selfishness with my family. So why don't you tell the story of maybe your first visit with St. Vincent de Paul and kind of where the connection is today with my family? I think my family would enjoy that, Dan.
Okay, good. Well, I joined the Catholic Church 25 years ago, roughly. And I was sitting in church with Barb, and Don Bowen gets up and gives this invitation to serve. And I'm sitting there just kind of like usual looking around. And Don talks about joining St. Vincent de Paul. And he talks a little more, and I'm listening. I'm really focused on him. And Barb's looking at me, and she says, "What's up?" I said, "I got to do that." I said, "I've been looking for something to exercise my faith and helping the disadvantaged or the poor is something I think I need to do, partly because of what I talked about with you was my father and mom getting help when he had that accident way back before I was even born, and how later in his life he gave money out and helped people get a ride to church or whatever. So I joined. So at the first meeting of it, I don't know anything. I know St. Vincent Paul in general has been around since 1952, the year I was born, and my my father-in-law Richard Walker had done quite a bit of work with him, and so I would hear him tell some things about it. So I go to the first meeting, and I don't know anything about it, just the basics. And they assigned me to go with Jim Bateman, your father, on a call to help somebody. And I thought, okay, we got money to work with? He goes, yeah, we got money to work with. Okay. So we go to Jasper and meet with a lady whose husband had an accident that lived south of Lagodi and needed help with a couple bills, and I don't know what they were, electric, water, things like that. And Jim did all the talking. I just listened. And he said, yeah, we'll pay this and this and this. And what do you think, Dan? I say, sounds good to me. And the full circle part to me was being able to help somebody whose husband had an accident, a car accident, and my father having a truck accident, and here I am sitting there being able to participate in helping them. And your dad was so gracious, and I wish he'd have stayed on longer with me, but he didn't last a lot longer after that, maybe a couple more years. But to be paired with him the first time was just such I think it was what hooked me. And I'm still there 22 years later, doing the same kind of thing. I quoted that quite a bit where Jim Bateman was the guy, he probably don't, I told him, but he probably didn't think of it at the time because he had this rookie St. Vincent Paul member with him. He's just doing what he's always done. And it was just, as an organization, it's probably one of the longest ones I've stayed with. And I don't see any future giving it up because it's still viable, still valuable, still helping people. But that's kind of my story about getting into it and still in it. Your sister's now our president, Sammy. Sammy Nelson's now our president, and she could be great at it. She's got just the right heart for it.
She's got the passion to help people, and that is interesting because when Dad would have taken you on that first trip, Sammy would have been a young lady, and here she is now president of the board, and she does great things, and I know you appreciate that, and I appreciate you telling that story because not many people think about Sam in that way yet, but she is involved with so many organizations, and I see the Dan Gregory in her, and working toward those items as well. So I appreciate you bringing that story up. Well, you were a member of the Hayesville Volunteer Fire Department for about 12 years.
Yeah.
Uh, Difficult? I mean, I can imagine you had some runs that just tore you up at times, right?
You know, I live in Martin County, and Hayesville is obviously in DuBois County, but they serve Rookford Township.
Mhm.
So the Rookford Township trustee has a contract with them for fire service. And a friend of mine, Brian Bookty, was on it already. And he said, this is something that, he said, I really like this fire department thing. Maybe you should try it. And I said, well, okay. So I did, and go to a little bit of a hearing aid side story. I was going up a stairway on New Year's Eve in Portersville, and when I come down, one of my hearing aids fell out, and it was gone for sure. But that was not that long after that I got to thinking about whether I should be doing fire service with a hearing loss like mine. Because, people are using radios, there's a lot of activity, it's life and death sometimes, and you really don't want to maybe put your fellow firemen or the people you're trying to help in a worse position because you didn't hear what they needed, and so you didn't give it to them. So I resigned that after 11 years for that reason. The volunteer fire departments around America are amazing. I mean, I did a study one time on what that's worth, the value of volunteer work, period. But I was really thinking more about the fire because they are out there almost every day. And Lagodi, you'll see them, you'll hear them going out. $16 an hour per person is the value they place on volunteer work. So if you do that
200 years.
200 years,
Yeah.
200 years times 365 times 16. But
And you've done that math.
no, no, I don't. No, I don't think anybody does the math. It's not math. But the things that we would try to have to pay if we could for that value, whether it's volunteering at the library, which we're sitting in, or St. Vincent Paul, uh, I don't. People really don't want paid. Volunteering is volunteering, and you don't expect pay. You don't expect recognition. You do it because you can and should. So, next question.
Just back to St. Vincent de Paul for a little bit, because I don't feel like I gave you a chance to talk about not only why you do it, but the passion that you think that you have that others should be involved in helping others less fortunate. I don't think I gave you a chance to do that. I know that's important to you.
I I think you have to maybe have some experience in receiving before you can give. I think whether it's directly or you see it or indirectly. Um, I don't think you can do it unless you have something like that. Uh, People have different levels of experience in everything. And in St. Paul work, I want to always tell some of I'm the veteran there now. I think been serving in the capacity of conference for the longest. Say, don't let the first thing you say be no. People call you for help. They didn't call you to be preached at or put down or told no without some really good reason. And I think that's society in general has maybe turned to a little more negative than they should. You can't always know all the circumstances that put them in a position to need you. Maybe you can figure it out. Maybe you shouldn't try too hard to figure it out. They need you. Let's say yes, and then see if we can help them in another way. We have several programs within the program for education needs, things like that. We had our food bank yesterday. It's hard to believe sometimes in a country this wealthy, yet there's a whole class of people who aren't participating in that wealth. And it's kind of sad. It's reality. I don't think we're ever going to be zero with that. But I tell you what, Greg, it's, as far as rewarding work, that's at the top of my list. Tom Boeing mentioned it to you in his interview about the one thing you could pick out of somebody's resume as being the most important. and that's mine.
And that brings up to me Don Bowling. That wasn't going to be a part of the conversation, but you've mentioned him a couple times. And I don't know that there's anybody, that's been as important to this community as Don Bowling. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I've had many mentors in my life, and not all of them necessarily older. But when Don became mayor of Lagodia, about my age now, and I'm ready to kind of step back and slow down some. He was ready to get going.
He was older than you.
I know. Yeah, I know. Why?
80 years old?
His son is my age. Frank's my age, so I know exactly how old Frank is. So I put Don, I know in his 90s. But I go see him every once in a while, and he's still got that same kind of interested in what's going on in spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And at that age, that's unusual.
Mm-hmm.
But the mentors in my life have always been. There's always been somebody like your father, like Don. There's so many, older and younger. I've had younger mentors that taught me some things.
And you were a county commissioner.
Yes.
For 11 years or so, right?
Yes, 11 years.
Elected official.
Yes.
Had to be somewhat challenging. Now you're in a different position. You're not in control as to what you give. You're just in control as to the information you get and how you distribute that information.
That's a good way
to the community.
That's a good way to put a commissioner's job in the county council. A lot of, we just went through an election, a local election, and there were some negatives in it that I thought were unfair on all sides, no names or anything. But when you're in an elected position, you come in there pretty much naive to the way budgets work and the way where the money comes from and why maybe the community looks like it looks. And I had an engineer from that we were working with, and he said, I said, we're a low tax county here. He goes, yeah. I said, I know. I can tell. I can see it. Pretty profound thought was sometimes money needs to be spent to make life better. It has to come from somewhere. But as a county commissioner, I enjoyed it. I was sitting next to my friend Paul George, who's the president. I totally mischaracterized Paul at first. I didn't think he was as good as he is. He's very good at what he does. He's sharp. He remembers things well. He handles the community meetings well. I was very impressed with him and still am. But from my point, my part of it was try to get up to speed as quick as you can because you're making decisions for people. I had 5,000 people in my district that I represented, and you start to looking at the how do you change. You don't go in there. I didn't go in there certainly for my ego. I didn't really care to do it one way or the other until I decided to do it, and then I wanted to do it right. So you go in and you get calls from people like, I need my road fixed. I go, yeah, we all do. Well, why can't mine be fixed? I said, well, tell me where you're at. And you look at the population and the traffic on a road, and back when they were laying out roads, Martin County was not dealt a very good hand on geography or the lay of the land. We got a lot of hills, a lot of curves, a lot of trees, a lot of things that other counties don't necessarily have. And it's hard to get them all fixed at once. You can't. I've been a big proponent of the wheel tax, which everybody goes, oh no, not another tax. I go, well, hear me out. We could have had it 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, that money would have bought a lot more than it'll buy today. So we're kind of behind that 8 ball of revenue versus the need. And if you look at how a community grows, and when I worked for Farvest Farms, they tasked me with finding farm locations, find some more farms for us to build on. And I'd take them down these county roads, and they said, you expect us to put our fleet of semis on this road? I said, no, I don't. And I was a county commissioner. And it's kind of sad to say, don't go down this road. That farm family could really use you, but getting to that farm family is not really that conducive to good business. So sitting next to Paul, I was starting to miss more in the meetings from my hearing loss. And started out, I was pretty well, could hear almost everything. I said, Paul, I'm starting to miss a lot of stuff. He goes, yeah, I noticed that. Because they would already have been talking about something and say, would say, well, what about that? And he'd say,
We just covered that.
we've already covered that. Like, okay. So I was in my 11th year, but I had another year to go in my term. I said, me and Barb want to go south for the winter more and more as we get older. So I'm not going to be here. That's not fair. You're paying me to do that, paying me to be here. And I said, I just can't hear well enough to continue on. So one of the few things that I resigned was the fire department and as a county commissioner, where it was kind of critical to be able to communicate and hear well. And that's just what I had to do.
Let's get back to the foundation. We've kind of started there. And from the conversation standpoint, maybe we'll end there, but I will give you a chance, in your own form, to talk about anything that we didn't talk about, anything you'd like to. But the foundation has grown into this wonderful, wonderful thing in our county. And you were there from almost the very beginning. Tell me how you got involved, why you stayed involved with the county foundation.
They invited me to some meetings amongst, before it was ever really a foundation, to talk about it and learn what it was. We met in the basement of the German American Bank, um, and had some people come down from Indianapolis, come down from Lawrence County, saying, you guys really should have a community foundation. There's opportunities here um, for your county to have this. And the biggest one at that time was the Lilly Scholar. And your daughter, my daughter, Lilly Scholar. So we kind of got probably a conflict of interest here. But we really didn't know how it worked. What's the mechanics? What's the back office? How do you start from zero? And Lilly Endowment at the time had programs out there where they were funding operating funds, funding labor, funding people and office space and things like that. So Gene Shaw, Steve Decker, Kenny Fry, Dave Brown, there was about 15 solid citizens, and I could name them, but I'll forget too many. Brent Corder. They were all kind of like me. I went to the meeting thinking, yeah, we should probably do something. I mean, we ever hear this opportunity is out there. So they started it. And it kind of started during a gift initiative, which Lilly puts out. And so they had some money to spend that first year to kind of shock the community and give them some kind of a taste of what it could be. And then the other thing of it was to hire somebody to grow endowments. And you have to start from zero, thinking you don't even know what an endowment is, or anything. They hired me, and I didn't really feel that qualified for it because nobody else did either. Because the job description was pretty vague, and it really didn't tell you how to do it. It just kind of started. So I thought about it a little bit. The farm was in a good place at the time. We had where we could handle it if I had a part-time job. So I took it, and I don't regret it at all. It was such a difference for a farm boy, kind of my own little circle of community people, to meet people out of the area. Meetings were in Bedford, and I met the whole staff over there, and wonderful people, just fantastic people. Took me in and told me things I needed to know. Unbeknownst to me, they were still kind of new too. So there was a learning curve on theirs was a little already advanced in mine, but said you need to start just by learning how endowments work. Look at the financial part of it. So look at what it can be, and talk to people about it. So when you start from zero, you can only go up. So we had already had a few people step up, and my family had stepped up, and others, and started endowments. And then, you just start doing some things in the papers and getting the word out and talking to people. And this thing has took off like a rocket the last 5 years. It takes, ironically, because you're starting at zero, you're a little bitty foundation, and you've got some of these monsters around that have just been around a long time, and they are pumping out cash like crazy, and you can't. And you're kind of jealous, but you kind of say, well, we'll get there someday. You just got to be patient. People have to learn about you, trust you, um, and make a decision. And typically, when it comes to estates, they go ahead and live their life. And then somewhere along the line, things change in that respect. And when you get a call and you've been named as a recipient of this person's estate, and that's happened over and over again. I was in a community foundation meeting in Indianapolis, and this lady just was almost like she told me exactly what I needed to hear. She said, "You little foundations, how many of you are even 10 years old?" And there was quite a few 10 years old, but a lot less than that too. "You're little baby foundations. You can't be a big foundation. You need to be 30 years old." And I'm thinking, I'll be 80. I'll be 80. So I thought, okay, so there's no reason to feel inferior because you're not a big foundation because you're too young. The people that are going to donate to you are still in their prime of their lives, some of them. So what you start talking about more from a giving from a checkbook or a cash position is your assets position, which you still need. You still need your home and you still need your whatever. And that was a revelation that really brought me back to you got to do the work now, but the rewards are going to come way later. And that started happening, like I said, about 5 years ago. We started getting a lot of that kind of thing. And it's so rewarding to see the grants that they're able to do, the scholarships they're able to do. Your family started a scholarship for your mother.
We do.
If they hadn't took that step in 1999, we wouldn't have that. And it's already become really good, and it's got so much more to go, and it's going to get there, and it's going to change this county.
Yeah, we just got together as a family and said we'd like to honor mom in a way of a scholarship, and it was an athletic scholarship at Lagodi schools. And I think it was Kurt Johnson contacted my dad, or I think it was Kurt, and just started talking about the advantages of allowing the foundation to handle it. And it's been very good for us in the scholarship. So I would encourage any of you who would like to do anything in that way. And Kurt talked to me on our little radio show about wills, right? You can will into the foundation. So there's all kinds of ways that you can participate. So I would very much encourage you, if you want to honor somebody with any sort of scholarship or anything you'd like to do that would grow money, that would help people, talk to the people like Dan Gregory and the Kurt Johnsons and the foundation, because 30 years is, as that lady talked about, is not far away, and it's become a pretty good sized foundation.
It's a good sized foundation relative to our population.
Right.
And that had to come in to get that real growth. Had to get some big estates that you'd talk to. I talked to some of them back when I was working for them, and it was 20 years, about 20 years before that actually come to fruition. So that gives you an idea of constant, the work that Kurt's doing now, a lot of it won't be felt 10, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. But the easiest places to do giving in that respect is maybe through IRAs or life insurance. Estate plans are great. My farm will not go to the community foundation. That's land. But me and Barbara both have things in our wills. We have things in our IRAs as beneficiaries. So it's given back in a way that doesn't necessarily hurt you financially today. Mm-hmm. But I can guarantee you, I think I can guarantee you, your children are going to watch you, and they're going to do it too, and then their children are going to do it too. So this thing of having a fund and a foundation is, if you put your name on it, it becomes very specific and purposeful to you and your family. Your mother was a wonderful person. I got to meet her with St. Vincent de Paul when she helped with the store. And you couldn't ask for a more gracious person, and to put her name and your father's name on an endowment fund, it's got to be a very rewarding thing to help that part of it, but also to help a student trying to get a better way in life by an education. Scholarships are great. And my daughter's a Lilly Scholar. My son had some scholarships from other places. It really helped a lot because, we didn't have a lot of money to put them through school. We had some. But to get that boost was really a game changer for them. And I think the community needs to think about that. And then the unrestricted funds, which I am a big fan of unrestricted funds because those endowments are unrestricted. Those payouts, those dollars that come from those goes to the need at the moment. And who knows what that need is 10 years from now or 50. So giving the local boards the decision making on payouts on those particular kind of funds, the unrestricted, is so important for the future. Because nobody can predict it.
Right.
We just know there'll be some need.
Yeah. There'll be some
And
need.
that's I love the Community Foundation. The people, Hope Perez, Kurt Johnson, the people working in Bedford, Diane Lineback, Lisa Starr, Judy Quile are all so good at what they do.
And they're so passionate about helping others, right? Getting their story and just helping it grow.
It's another avenue. You know, people need stuff today, and you can and like in St. Paul, we can do immediate needs. But when you start looking further out, when you're not even going to be involved with the decision making and trusting your local board members to be just like you were, passionate, knowledgeable about what needs to be done, and that's to me is what makes community foundations so popular and getting more so all the time because people start to see that that availability of funds and the responsibility of dealing with those funds. It's just great, Greg, and I I'm still involved with it. I'm on the finance committee yet, but I spent 22 years being around community foundation world, and I still always amazed that some people haven't even heard of it yet. So well, more and more all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's long term, Martin County Community Foundation, right? I mean, it's not something just flows off the tongue, but you've seen the checks out there flowing, but it doesn't just happen. It happens because of people like you and me getting involved and finding out more what we can do. So I encourage you to talk to the foundation about what you might be able to do. Well, we said from the beginning, Dan, that there's no way we're going to be able to justify what you've been able to do for our community. First of all, I thank you again for everything you've done for the community. And we'll get up on screen maybe as much as we can to let the people see all the time. It's not just 6 months here, 6 months there. It's 10 years, 20 years, and such. So thank you so much for that. But I want to give you the forum now. Maybe things that you thought I might ask or that you wanted to get out there that you'd like to right now in any form or fashion.
Not really. I think we touched on a lot of topics. When I sent you the list that I used for an organization I'm with, the things I've been involved in, I was thinking about each one of them and why I got involved. Every single one of them, maybe I think almost all of them, somebody asked me to. And you think about, you know, the power of that person asking them, why me? And somebody seen something that thought you would probably be a good fit for this or at this time in your life. And I go back to saying yes. Don't out. When somebody asks you something to be a part of something, don't let the first word be no. It could be maybe. Maybe shouldn't be yes until you ask a few more questions. But don't discount the value of being involved in not just for the giving part, but the receiving part. I've received probably far more than I've given so far by being involved in every one of those things. One that I particularly look at that and think about which one really probably affected me more when I worked with the hospice. And I worked with Helping Hearts Hospice out of Washington. They helped my father when he passed away. And they called me and said, we need men who will talk to men on a man-to-man basis. And we can't find them. And I said, let me think about it.
It's uncomfortable when you first think about it.
It didn't bother me I knew I could do it. Do I want to do it? Because you're dealing with people who are terminal and they know it. And now you know it. And it's a whole different conversation. You're not talking about the future too much. There's not much of a future left. So you're talking about maybe just their life. And I had 3 gentlemen, every one of them different, that I worked through the final days. And I think I come away with a different feeling about passing. Whereas these guys had accepted it, they knew it. We had fun talking about everything but dying. And you know, I went to one place for a year, over and over again, and it was, you know, you could see the effects of the cancer taking more and more and more away. But you know, I was the one man that would come talk to him and say, you know, tell me some of the things you ask people was what I was talking to them about. Was tell me about your upbringing. We bonded on farming. We bonded on Vietnam stuff. We bonded on everything. and we never talked about dying.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that kind of a conversation. That was for somebody else, not me.
Yeah.
I wasn't there to tell them you're dying because they already knew it.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about life.
We talked about life, and we had good conversations. And was it hard? Going in that door the first time was a little stressful for me just because I didn't know if they were going to accept me. The first guy said, "I'm going to ask you 3 questions before you can sit down." I go, "Fire away." He said, "What's your faith?" I said, "I'm Catholic. I was raised a Methodist. I'm a Christian." He said, "Okay." And second question was, "What's your politics?" I said, "I vote for the man. I vote for Democrats. I vote Republicans. I voted Independents. I don't care about politics and names like that." I said, good answer. I'm thinking like I'm taking a test, and I was. And the third question kind of blew me away. He said, "Do you mind if I smoke?" I said, "You got lung cancer, right?" He goes, "Yep." I said, "Smoke away. You're not going to quit now." He said, "Sit down, let's talk."
Yeah.
And we had a 1 year off and on conversation about every week, every other week, just sit with him. And I really felt like he needed that. And I think I needed it too.
Well, when the good Lord opens those pearly gates, I think he opens them for people like you.
I hope so.
And I thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's Dan Gregory, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit more about this Indiana neighbor. Thank you so much.